Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. My dad will be so grateful. See you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.
Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast, a show about crafting a life you love and making work optional, using the tools of mindfulness, envisioning, and financial independence. I'm your host, Adam Coelho, and I'm so glad you're here. Each episode of the Mindful Fire podcast explores these 3 tools through teachings, guided meditations, and inspiring interviews with people actually living them to craft a life they love. At its core, Mindful Fire is about creating more awareness and choice in your life. Mindfulness helps you develop self-awareness to know yourself better and what's most important to you by practicing a kind, curious awareness. Envisioning is all about choosing to think big about your life and putting the power of your predicting brain to work to create the life you dream of. And financial independence brings awareness and choice to your financial life, empowering you to make your vision a reality by getting your money sorted out and ultimately making work optional. And here's the best part. You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to live out your vision. Mindful Fire is about using these tools to craft that life now on the path to financial independence and beyond. If you're ready to start your Mindful Fire journey, go to mindfulfire.org/start and download my free envisioning guide. In just 10 minutes, this guide will help you craft a clear and inspiring vision for your life. Again, you can download it for free at mindfulfire.org/start. Let's jump into today's episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Fire podcast, a show about crafting a life you love and making work optional using mindfulness, envisioning, and financial independence. I'm so excited to be joined by my friend Jeff Jaworski today. And the reason I'm so excited is because Jeff is living out my vision. He's a few steps ahead of me, maybe more than a few steps ahead of me, but he was at Google. He had a successful career at Google, but he felt this itch to pursue his own path, to reach financial independence and to move into a new chapter of life. And he has recently done that. And so I am super excited about this episode because I want to unpack how he made this happen, both financially, mentally, emotionally, all the things, how he got to the point where he said, now's the time. And I want to hear what he's up to after leaving Google. So I hope you're as excited as I am. Let's jump into today's episode. Jeff, welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Hey, Adam. I am so excited to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, as you know, we've both been looking forward to this one for a while. You reached out to me probably, 6 months ago or so, and we kind of had a few meetings at Google and got to know each other a little bit. Found out we are quite aligned on our thoughts about retirement, in quotes, and financial independence and all those things. And so I'm really excited to have you on the podcast now that you've actually exercised that financial independence and made a huge change in your life. Let's start with having you share a little bit about who you are, your journey, and what you're up to in the world.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. I'm a 20 plus year tech and digital advertising veteran. I started back in 2004, I want to say, as a intern at an ad agency. Had a successful career in the agency space for about 8 years and left as a media director to join Google. And then I spent 12 and a half years at Google doing a variety of roles, frontline sales leadership, worked in learning and development for about 5 years. And during that time, really got very passionate about skill and capability development and coaching. And that really just became my passion. And now, I'm taking the culmination of all those experiences and have decided to make a move or make a shift. And we'll get into this in a moment, but to start my own business called The Shift. And it's really focused on being very purposeful with the work that I am now doing and also hopefully helping others fulfill their purpose as well.
Very cool. Yeah. There's a lot there to unpack, but it's, as you're speaking, it's interesting to recognize the parallels in my life, right? Like your interest in coaching really came out of your work at Google, right? Your
Yeah.
shift from sales into learning and development, and then developing the coaching program at Google, which I have since we last spoke, I've actually done one session and it was
Amazing.
fantastic. I loved it. It made my meeting so much more successful. So thank you for developing that. But I think also just like for me as well, like my work at Google and my kind of like a little what I call the on the job side hustle of teaching search inside yourself, learning facilitation, learning mindfulness, unlocked this like passion for me that allowed me to propelling me into this work that I'm doing both inside and outside of Google around mindfulness and visioning and all those things. I'm curious when that first came about for you and how you nurtured that within your career to test it out, right? Like it's one thing to think, oh, this might be, pretty interested in this, but how did you cultivate that to the point where it's like, this is what I want to do?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that question, Adam. Look, I'm a big believer in call it what you want, but, stacking experiences, I guess I would say, that we talk a lot about like, people think their career is a ladder, or if you ask Sheryl Sandberg, she'll say it's a jungle gym. For me, it's been kind of a culmination of different like mountains or peaks, if you will. And I get to these stages where I make decisions on, am I still learning, growing? Am I doing something I'm passionate about? Would I do the extra work even if I wasn't asked to do it? And that's when I know I'm in a space that I love and I enjoy and I'll get a lot of fulfillment out of. For me, after the first 8 years at Google in sales, I love sales and I still love sales. But I had this moment, I was actually on paternity leave with our third child. And I said to myself, if you come back to the same role, are you going to continue to be excited? And as much as I love my team and the work of my clients, the answer was a resounding no. And I thought to myself, okay, then what is next for you? And at the time, we had just started rolling out some new kind of skill work and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And this could be a space where I could help our organization in a more scalable way and do something that I'm passionate about. Like I really care about skill and capability development. So, I started pursuing that, kind of made that move within that period of time. Just my passion for it continued to grow. So we went from, at the time, doing different e-learning content and things of that nature to building like world-class onboarding programs that teach people all about our products, but also like the art and skill of selling. And then to the point you mentioned, founding this global sales coaching program. And even that program expanded beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, we would get testimonial feedback. One of the testimonials we got that I'll never forget was a seller saying to the coach, I have hope again. And wow, like when you're impacting someone's life that way and you realize, oh, wow, remember, there's a person behind each sale we do, and they might be going through stuff, imposter syndrome, stress, whatever that might be. To know that we are touching and supporting them in that way is just so powerful. And then coaching has just been something that's really important to me as well. So over the last few years, I've also invested in coaching, going through my own certifications, doing that through Hudson and other programs that I've focused on. And it helps me not only lead in that way in my life, but also role model it as well and support others. So I'll pause there and see what comes up for you. But yeah, it's an exciting, the journey has been exciting in the sense that I've continued to build out these things. And now I look back and I'm like, wow, like you have this kind of like collective package of being a customer, being a leader, being a seller, being a sales leader, going into learning development, pursuing your passion for coaching, and then all the while being very thoughtful about how I live my life so that when I want to make a choice, like the choice I've made, I can make that choice, right? I have control over my time and how I choose to use it.
Yeah, I really like that because I think you mentioned like the series of peaks, right? And kind of stacking, two different metaphors there. But I think that like you or climbing these hills and mountains, and then you get to the top of one hill and you're like, actually, this is just part of a bigger mountain, right?
Yeah.
And so you just keep climbing, and like climbing can sound like a bad thing, but like when you add the stacking, it's like you're adding on things. And when you get to the top of one peak, you realize like, wow, there's actually other things that this is building me towards and that I can learn to improve and grow as a person. And, I think back to the side of financial independence, you're stacking there as well. You're stacking cash, right? Stacking cash, stacking investments. And each time you do that in both realms, like whether it be financial or skill wise, you're giving yourself more options and more capabilities and more opportunities. And so I really liked that example. And then just like one more comment on what you created and your team created with the Coaching by Mastery program. Like, I've done it once so far. I'm going to do it again. But I think there's just, I got goosebumps when you said that person felt hope again. And it's just so powerful, the space that you created. Like, I was like, this is an hour? Like, how is this an hour? And then I'm like, wait a second, this is like a senior person I'm meeting with for an hour. And it was just like, you need that space. If it was a half hour, it's just like, oh, well, like, it's just like very surface level. But once we got into it, that just having that space to explore with someone who is ahead of you in your career, that has, they're like, further along in their journey, but they also are committed to showing up in a space where they're holding a safe space for you to practice and to learn and grow and make mistakes. It was a really special space. And I want to commend you for the way that you design that, because that's what I try to do when I facilitate workshops or hold space for people. And to have that in the corporate setting in a place like Google, where it's competitive, it's fast moving, it's all these things, it's a true gift. So I just wanted to say thank you for that again and kind of highlight that.
Thank you for your participation. Hopefully many more sessions to come for you, but I'm glad the one you had was impactful. And the 3 words we used when building the program, we talked all the time about was, it is safe, relevant, and effective. Those are the 3 things that were the most important to us, and safe being the number one, because, look, we're in a high pressure environment. The expectations continue to rise. And it's really important to invest in people in this moment and make sure that they know that they're supported and that there's a person there still that is, has a quota and metrics and things of that nature to attain, and may need a experienced partner. Sometimes not always sometimes their manager, sometimes not their manager, that can just get deep, like dig deep. What are the real root challenges we're trying to solve for here? Or, we've had cases where we've had to say like, wait, this seller, I don't know that they're even quite ready for this big pitch that they want to have in a couple of weeks, because there's something else going on here that we need to take a step back and unpack. It's been an interesting journey in that space, and the program has delivered thousands of sessions already across the world. It's in the Americas, it's in APAC, and the amount of testimonials, I was getting them forwarded to me almost on a daily basis. So, the power of coaching is real. I know some companies, Google and others, know coaching really well. They invest in coaching. They know the impact it has. And many others, coaching still kind of fuzzy, right? Like, what does that all mean, right? And sometimes you just have to experience it to just realize the power it can have.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about your journey of kind of stacking, right? You're stacking the skills, realizing over time that, this is what I want to do. I love this aspect of my work and I want to pursue this further. At the same time, you're also aware of financial independence and kind of stacking in that way as well. Tell me about how you thought about financial independence. When did you first come across the idea?
Yeah.
How did you start to implement in your life to create these options that you have now taken advantage of?
Yeah, great question. So, and I know, many who watch this will probably know what FIRE is, and maybe others won't, but, I really started leaning into that space, I would say probably in my 30s, where I was thinking a lot about how do I just make sure I'm investing in my future self? And I think it's very easy to, when you're younger, to go like, oh, I'll never be 45 or right. But that will come. Right. And so I'll be 45 later this year. And I think about your younger self. How can your younger self prepare and invest in your future self? Think of that next person and what you want to kind of work towards and become. So it takes time, right? But I think there's very simple things you can do to make sure that you're living well within your means so that you can invest in your future self. And then what it unlocks for you is, and you said this, it unlocks options, it unlocks more intention around how you're using your time, the choices you're making and how you use your time. and gives you really, kind of more control, right? So when we talk air quotes on retirement, like when I say I retired from Google, but that was a choice to really lean into my purpose, lean into my passion, and also spend more time with my kids while they're young. A couple of years from now, I might say I miss corporate world and I want to do X, Y, or Z, right? But again, it's a focus on making purposeful decisions and things I want to do versus things I might feel like I have to do. That is a very big difference, right? Because there's a lot of spaces, you hear the word a lot about, people will say like, I feel stuck. And when you feel stuckness, right, that's a very challenging word and feeling to have, because then you feel like you've lost choice, or you actually don't even know what choice you would make next, right? So again, that you get into like, do you have a plan? The financial part's a part of it. Like, look, I'm not a financial expert necessarily, but the financial part helps you have a plan towards what you're working towards. And then similarly in your life and career, what are you working towards? And going back to the stacking, like, what are you stacking, right? Each time I got to like my own proverbial peak, if I wanted to do something else, in a lot of cases, actually, I was kind of starting over a little bit, right? But with the experience of like, oh, I've climbed a mountain before. So if I'm going to climb another mountain, I already have a bunch of skills and knowledge to go climb the next one. The next one might be a little higher or harder in different spaces. Like going into learning and development, I had no L&D background, right? I didn't know instructional design or any of that stuff, but you go into it and you say, these are the things I do know. And these are the experiences that I do have. And then you're very open about the skills and the experiences you're looking to gain. So I think that's the important piece, is like, what are you building up towards, both financially, but also from like personal and work experiences, and what's important to you.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, right? Like you can get the money side figured out and still get there and not have any idea what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
So you need to actually create some space for yourself to think, what do I actually want? And then how do I start moving and using these opportunities that I have in my career to explore those and get there?
Absolutely. And, look, it's different for everybody. If you're type A, you're always chasing something. You're always going after something. What's the next, level? What's the next title? What's the next promotion? It's funny. I look back on my career and I haven't, like, I've done that in moments, but I go back to these peaks, but I haven't always actually looked at it that way. So as an example, when I talk about these different mountains and peaks, like after graduating high school, the thing you're supposed to do, right, is go to college. So I did that. But I actually didn't really know what I wanted to do. My dream job back then was to be like an ESPN sports anchor, like Stuart Scott. Like that would have been my dream gig. And when I went to college, I majored in television and video to do that. But when I went there, I didn't really do a whole lot of research. And I was like, I should actually figure out what the job placement rate is for this major. And the answer was 3%. Right. And that was my first moment of like, whoa, like, is this really what you want? Do you want this so bad that you're going to go after the 3% and all the other things? And I kind of came to the realization the answer was no. And I still remember, I think about a week later on a ride home with a friend of mine, I made the decision to completely drop out. So then that was like the first, okay, now I'm starting over. And I was working at Best Buy at the time. When they got wind of it, they offered me a supervisor position. I had no idea they had any interest in me doing that. And I became the youngest supervisor in the company at 19. When that happened, I learned two things about myself. I love sales and I love managing and helping people, right? So that would have never happened if I didn't make that decision, right? And then there's been many more since then. I got to a top performer at Best Buy, won an award. They took me to this offsite and all these other things. Shortly after that, I did the same thing. Is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? And the answer for me was no. So I got to my own proverbial peak of that experience and decided to go back to college. Took a demotion, went back to college, started over, right? So I'm happy to share more on these spaces, but like those are just a couple examples of you hit your own peaks, and then sometimes you might actually go down to then move up even higher in the next decision you make, right? So I'm in the midst right now of like, I'm looking up at a potentially, who knows how big the mountain is, right? But I am kind of starting over again. I've never been an entrepreneur before. So in this space, I'm taking the culmination of my experiences and saying, I've climbed many mountains before. I've done hard things before. How do you take all those experiences, the skills and knowledge you've gained, and then move into the next thing?
Yeah, that's very interesting. The aspect of starting over. Anyone can relate to this because if you ever start a new job, you're starting over in a lot of ways, right? Even within the same
Yeah.
company. I mean, I remember when I started a new role a couple times at Google, and honestly, roles that I didn't even choose. I mean, I
Hmm.
just got reorged again. And now I have a new job and a new team and a new manager. And it's like, yeah, I'm starting over, right? But like,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I look back on just like the last like 2 months, like I've like adapted pretty quickly and like gotten in a decent groove and made some good progress because of all the stacking skills I've done before. And I'd love to move into this like, okay, I'm passionate about helping people develop skills and capabilities. I'm passionate about coaching. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to move into entrepreneurship. How do you say it's time, right? Tell
Yeah.
me about how that came about and how you actually were like, yeah, like I'm going to leave this awesome job. You were a
Yeah.
director at Google, right? That's a
Yeah.
pretty coveted job. How
Yeah.
did you come to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this? Because I've
Yeah.
thought that 100,000 times, and I'm not a
Yeah.
director at Google. So
Yeah.
I'm very curious about how you made that leap.
Yeah. Great question. Well, look, it wasn't an overnight decision. It took a lot of time and a lot of work that I had done, to prepare for it. I would say it was probably 2 years in the making. So even before I got to director, I would say, I was starting to think through what I might want to do in the future and do next. If you would have asked me, or we were doing this podcast 2-ish years ago, and you said, "Hey, Jeff, I have a sense you're going to start your own company in the future," I would have said, "You're crazy. Like, no way." That wasn't even on my radar a couple of years ago, but it really was investing in coaching myself, going through Hudson Institute of Coaching and that program and being coached where I started to get really clear about what I might want to do next. I have a vision board that sits right here and I look at it all the time. I'd never done a vision board before, but that was the capstone of this program I went through. And there was a date in the corner of it that says 12/18/2023. As we record this, it has not happened yet, right? That date was an important marker to say, what do you potentially want to do next? And the answer could have been, hey, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. Keep doing the thing you're doing, right? That was very much an option. It wasn't a forced, you have to make a change. But then you may notice that I've already made this decision before 12/18/2023. So my last day at Google was July 7th. And really for me, use these words, but they were ringing in my head. I did all this work. I did all the preparation. There's milestones on the back of the vision board that say, these are the things you need to get done to be ready. I had done them all and more. So I just started asking myself, like, what are you waiting for? I'd done the work financially. I had 8 million conversations with my financial advisor, pressure testing, all the things, make sure I had runway. And then I also had built the website, had started thinking through the messaging, had already been coaching and supporting people. And I got to this point where I was like, what are you waiting for? What else do you need to do? Because really, there's no such thing as the perfect time, and there's no such thing as being perfectly ready. Those two things are just not true. They don't exist, right? So essentially what I did was I was going to a learning conference in May, and I said to myself, like, use this as a marker point. Go to this conference as my future self, which is as the shift, running the shift, not as a Googler, right? And of course, people would know I'm at Google, all those things, that's fine. So I went in there intentionally as my future self. And I remember the first question they asked us when we arrived at the conference was they said, what is your intention? And I did not know they were going to ask that question. I was like, wow, that's a pretty powerful question. I won't swear on your podcast, but I would say what I wrote down was to make a effing decision around what I was going to do. And the back of a notepad, I was writing to shift, not to shift, this whole list of the reasons why or why not to do it. And the reasons not to do it were all very logical, right? Health insurance, financial security, safer decision for my wife and my family, and things like that, to just keep doing what I was doing. But the reasons to do it was a long list around purpose-driven, flexibility, a lot of other stuff. And then the one that really cracked it open for me was I had this kind of epiphany during lunch. And the answer I gave to a fellow coach was they get their dad back. And that was just a very powerful thing for me because I felt like I was so consumed with working, meetings, pings, emails, and then mentally I was working all the time. My brain was going all the time. My youngest son, he's 5, and he'd say, "Hey, Dad, come play with me." And even if I did, my body was there, but my brain wasn't, if I'm really just honest about it. And I said to myself, like, these are very fleeting years. And this is an important time where I can actually like create this life where I can still do work I love, be very, very purposeful with that work, but also really embrace and lean into time with my family. So that's the culmination of why I made the decision. The timing, frankly, there were just days I left the office and my brain, like literally the words were like, it's time. Like, and it got to a point where my inner voice was almost like yelling at me, like, come on, let's go. So at some point you just have to decide, are you going to do this or not? And for me, I felt like there would always be a what if I didn't give this a go. So no matter what happens, I will know that I've gone for it. I can answer the what if question. This may be the thing I do for the next 20 years or the rest of my life. I might do it for a couple and say entrepreneurship's not for me. Who knows? But the key is it was important to me. I prepared for it and I know I can answer that question now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that kind of backstory and how you went to that conference and got the clarity. I like that idea of showing up as your future self, right? I've done that in like pockets in a day. For instance, like today is a pretty good example of that. Like I had a coaching call before this. I'm now doing this podcast with you, both things that light me up and I really, really enjoy. But yeah, there's something powerful about like stepping into the person you want to be and just living that life. And there's nothing preventing you from doing that except for because you don't want to or you think you can't. But you absolutely can. And it's cool to hear that taking on that new identity helped you realize like, wow, like this is what this could mean for me. And they get their dad back. I got chills when you said that because like these, what did they say? The days are long, but the years are short. They sure are short.
Yeah, that's very true.
But yeah, you're never going to get this time back. I guess one thing that comes to mind for me when I think that, part of me thinks that, okay, if I go and I make this big change and I step into entrepreneurship, am I just going to fill all the time with that? Right? Mm-hmm. Because like right now, I'm like, oh, well, I'm able to do both. Right. But the reality of that is I'm working full time. I'm parenting. I have a relationship with my wife. And I also am side hustling. Right. And so for me, like all this stuff, side hustling and work, it's just like it's going through my mind all the time, like you described. You know, I guess my fear is that if I go and I leave and I do this, then the entrepreneurship stuff is just going to fill up all that mental space. Yeah. Have you thought about that? Is there anything that you're doing to prevent that?
This is where I can impart some of my own experience. Just as of this recording, I've been doing this for a little over a month, right? I left Google on July 7th and then took a little bit of a break, a little hiatus, went on vacation, lived in Ireland for a couple of weeks, and then came back and I was like, okay, it's time to get started, right? And I would tell you, you're going to be as busy as you choose to be in a sense, right? Because there's always things to do, right? There's always, like I've learned, there's so much administrative stuff you could do. You're going to choose how often do you want to how much time you want to spend on LinkedIn and be social, how many different networking meetings do you want to try to have, and then picking up clients and all those other things. So for me, it's really, I'll go back to the piece on being intentional, right? You have to be very intentional and you have to be very clear on why you're doing what you're doing. And a big part of this for me is really family oriented. So if all of a sudden I go from, hey, I'm not going to take meetings before 10 and I'm not going to take meetings after 3, if all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I'm taking meetings at 8 a.m. and this day didn't end until 6, then I have to check myself on that and go, hold on, like, are you still within the parameters and the boundaries that you were trying to create for yourself? And those all become your choice, right? Like no one's making you do that. People can ask you to do that. Hey, like I can't do 10. Can you do 8? And then you have to make a choice around that. I think that's a big piece. I will tell you when I cleared it all through, right? So to your point on like working a full-time job, doing the side hustle, everything like that, it was pretty clear to me pretty quickly that I didn't have the time or mental capacity to add this, right? Like technically, I'm sure I could have operated in a way where I could have stayed at Google and done this. I just didn't feel like I was going to be able to give this its real like fair shot, if you will, doing it that way. And I was already pretty like consumed with too many other things. So I just said to myself, like, you're either all in or you're all out, is the way I looked at it from like the entrepreneur side of things. And with that, you're going to be in your head a lot, right? Like all of a sudden you've got all this time to think through how you want to use it. And that can be the most powerful thing in the world. And that can also be the most dangerous thing in the world if you start saying to yourself, like, I can't do this, or I'm not going to be successful, or whatever. You have to be ready for, you're going to be talking to yourself a lot. Make sure you have still a good kind of like board of advisors, if you will, people you trust that you can talk to and stay connected with. And then again, like be really clear on why you're doing it, because there will be moments where you might actually not realize you're straying away from it. And you have to go back and say, and you can adjust, but you have to go back and say, like, hold on a second, like, remember, this is why you're doing this. And then be very choiceful and intentional with how you spend your time. That's the way I look at it, but it's, very, very early days. So it's still a work in progress for me as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really good advice, because you're in control to a large degree on how you want to go about creating this life. And yeah, you're going to get off track, right? So I think as you were speaking, I was thinking like, man, just like writing down like a why statement. I've heard about this in other FIRE podcasts. I think they call it like a financial plan guide rails, right? It's like, here's what I'm going to do. And that's not the name, but here's how I'm going to invest and what I'm going to do when the market drops and things like that. So like you can do this for yourself, like an operating system for your life. It's like, this is why I'm doing this, because it's very easy to get caught up and to chase the shiny objects and to get consumed by all the things. And I do that all the time myself. And it really just, it takes the fun out of it, right? It takes the intentionality out of it.
Thinking through the why of it, right? I mean, I guess the other piece I would offer is remembering your why. I think Simon Sinek talks about like start with the why, start with the why of what you're doing. And, if you can continue to go back to that and you feel really good about the rationale and the why behind it, then you can continue to carry yourself forward, right? But the moment you start to compare your why to somebody else's is when you get yourself in trouble, right? So, or you could get off track. So for example, not being at Google anymore. And as I first start out, and again, like I did the financial preparations to be able to do this, you can't now compare yourself to knowing like, oh, well, this is what I used to make. And this was my health insurance over here. And this person has X, Y, and Z, and I don't have that, or it looks different for me. Okay. Yeah. That you chose that, right? That was your choice. That was your why behind it. Same thing with the amount of hours you want to work or the work you want to do. So even as I launch the business, I'm diversified in terms of the different types of work I will do, but all of the different types of work that I'm offering and looking to do are things I want to do. So again, like it's important to say, these are things I want to do. I'm not out there offering things that I go like, more people are going to want this, so I'll do it because they'll do it. But then how does that actually help me fulfill what I'm trying to accomplish? I want those things to always feel mutual, right? I don't want to get into partnerships with companies, people, et cetera, where it feels one-sided. Both sides should feel excited and motivated by the work we're going to do together. And that's really, really important. And then from a measure of success, it's funny, so many people, the buzzwords I heard a lot when I was leaving, people would reach out to me and say, hey, oh my gosh, the decision you made, I'm so inspired by it, or you're so courageous, or what a bold move, like all those words. And then I also heard some, I'm jealous or envious of what you're doing. I want to do this too. How are you doing this? All those things. I'd also hear, oh, your business is going to be amazing. It's going to flourish. You're going to do so great, et cetera, et cetera. The thing I always remind myself when I would hear those things is they're saying those things from their own lens, right? So when someone says they believe they're inspired by what I'm doing, the question I might play back to the person might be like, okay, great. But if you're inspired by this, like, what are you doing to inspire yourself? What would your own inspiration look like for you, right? Same thing with using words like courage or words like jealousy, right? Like if you're jealous, then like, what's your plan? What are you working towards? How can I support you in that? And then making sure you have your own measure of success. Because for me, money is not the only measure, right? If money was the only measure, then I would probably have to change some of my OKRs, right? I probably wouldn't be saying 10 to 3 is my meeting window and things of that nature. There's other measures of success, more time with my family, more spaciousness, more intentionality around how I'm using my time, et cetera. Again, like people are going to always have their own measures. It's really important to be careful not to compare yourself with others and be really clear on the return on your own investment that you're trying to make.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And that gets back to having a clear vision for what you actually want and why you actually want that, because it's so easy to get distracted, see what other people are doing. They're like, oh, I could do that and I could do that. But, I like what you said about getting really clear on like what things, what offerings you actually want to put out there and that you want to actually spend your time on. I want to ask more about that. But first, I want to ask you how you think about financial independence as like a capability you now have that you've built, that you've stacked over the years. And as you pursue entrepreneurship, obviously you want to make some money with the business, but financial independence in my mind, and as I think about my own journey to financial independence and my why for financial independence, it is exactly what you're doing. I want to pursue entrepreneurship from a place of sufficiency, from a place of knowing I have enough, knowing that I will always be able to take care of my family, put food on the table, and that I can build this business with that knowing and that backstop and that safety net underneath me. So I'm curious, how do you think about that as you left Google and you took some time off and you look towards now that you've actually started moving into the business? How do you think about financial independence as a kind of capacity or capability in your life?
Yeah. I'll be very clear in saying if I didn't have financial runway, I wouldn't be doing it, right? I wouldn't have been comfortable doing this. I'm self-funding it. I'm literally investing in my future, which is now my current self as I start this business. But I think the powerful element in this is it goes back again to there's really the two most important things you have in your life are your time and how you choose to use it. And what financial independence has provided for me, or, the runway I've built to build this business is the ability to move into this space again with intentionality, with purpose, and to know that I have runway, right? So that when I'm working through things, when I'm networking, when I'm having conversations, when I'm exploring partnerships, et cetera, these are all things that I want to be doing, right? And it's less about, oh, I have to do this, otherwise I'm not going to be able to buy groceries, right? So I think a big part of the financial independence piece is there's the current state for people who are in an ideal space, you're doing work you love and also preparing yourself for what's the next thing you're going to love and the next thing you're going to love and the next thing you're going to love. I think a lot of people live in their current moment and their current state and don't think through these things. And all of a sudden, a lot of time has passed. And then that's when you run that risk of like stuckness of like, well, now I just feel stuck. I don't know what I want to do next. And I don't have the financial independence to actually like have any control over what I do next. So you have to build towards those things. But I flat out would not be doing this. Like my family means way too much to me to ever put us in that type of position. But knowing I have their support, knowing that they believe in me and they trust me, and that we have built financial runway to do this and really invest in such an important part of my kids' lives when they're young, it just means that it means the world to me. It means more to me than any amount of money could. The money is enabling the ability to pursue my passion and really spend more time with my family.
Yeah, that's a powerful testimonial right there, like for financial independence. I would not be doing this if I didn't have the financial independence, the financial runway, as you call it. And another thing that came up for me is like, this is an investment in your family. This is an investment in your kids, full stop, right? In their life, in their happiness, in their connectedness with you. And that's a really cool way to think about things. It's not just financial investments, like investing time, investing in yourself, investing in your kids, right? All these things are investments and they're being supported by the financial investments that you've made in the past. It's a stacking that you've done. And then certainly the skill stacking that you have done as well, right? You wouldn't have achieved financial independence or financial runway at this early age had you not learned the skills of that, but also progressed in your career, been successful there, and also built that awareness of what it is you actually want to do. So I think it really just speaks to being intentional kind of in all respects as much as you can.
Yeah, 100%. And look, a big part of this is like you've got to have a plan, right? Like, what are you working towards? And there's going to be micro elements of that. Okay, the thing I'm doing right now, what do I want to get out of this over the course of a couple of years? But then again, using that stacking, like these things build upon themselves over time, right? So I was in the digital tech advertising industry for over 20 years. I don't remember the exact day I started really packing money to the side and investing like that, but I'd say maybe 5 years into it, I realized I should be more serious about maxing my 401k and things of that nature. And then you build your way towards that. But the other part of this as well with the business, and a lot of what you're doing with the podcast, for example, is your passion. You're building toward that. You're building a community, you're building followership, you're building content. I was building experiences, right? Like the reason why I feel excited about the shift is because of the fact that the culmination of all these different experiences, and it really is tailored primarily to helping sales teams, sales organizations, and sellers really bring out the very best in themselves. I honestly don't know that I would have felt good about the marketing of my business or my offer if I couldn't confidently say over the last 20 years, I've sat at all of the tables. I've been the customer. I've listened to all the pitches. I've done the buying. I've done the selling. I've led sales teams. I've been in learning development. I've done capability development. I've done coaching. Like all those things wrapped together are, again, I use the word culmination. It's just the culmination of the experiences and then preparing myself for the next move, even not even knowing at some point I might want to try to start my own business. Like I didn't start putting money aside thinking one day I'm going to start my own business. I started putting money aside because I care really deeply about being able to retire and being choiceful with what I do. This just so happens to be the choice that I've made.
Yeah, that's important. It's a good distinction. Let's get into a little bit more about the shift, right? Your new business. Yeah. Tell me about your intention for that business, your vision for that business, and how you're going about making it happen so far.
Sounds awesome. Thanks. So the shift, the tagline I'm currently using is guiding people, teams, and organizations to identify and make the shift that will transform their impact in its simplest form. The goal with this is really for all of us, whether it's individually, as a team, as an organization, there's always one big shift or change that can make a meaningful difference. So there's lots of little things you can do underneath that, but really the intention behind this is to think through like, what is the big shift you would want to make or someone else would want to make? And then how do I help you get there? How do we build a plan around that and help you get there? But you really have that kind of big shift, ambitious goal, if you will, to focus on. So as an example with the Coaching by Mastery program, the Google's sales coaching program, our number one shift was meeting effectiveness. We obsessed over, we need to have better meetings with customers. And if we have better meetings with customers, we will drive better partnerships, we'll drive more revenue, et cetera. And I can say with confidence, we've done that to a level that I didn't even anticipate. Now, as I build this business, it's helping others identify the shift for them and then building the right kind of plan and actions to help them get to where they want to go and transform their impact over a longer period of time.
Got it. Very cool. And you mentioned like there are various ways that you want to be offering this. How do you envision those? Because I think about my own, I want to be offering coaching and various things. I think about like various offerings like workshops and speaking and like, so I'm curious, like what are yours?
Yeah. So my set of offerings currently are, I offer one-on-one coaching. So personalized, we can get deep on the shift you're hoping to make and then build a plan around that. I am doing a lot of team and group coaching and workshops currently. I still do a lot of work actually with Google in this space, which is a lot of fun. And I'm working with a couple other companies on that as well. I do offer speaking engagements where I can actually just come in and talk and drive some inspiration around the impact of coaching and driving higher performing teams and my experiences at Google and over the last 20 years. And then the other piece I'm offering, which is really interesting, is I don't know if you're familiar with fractional leadership, but essentially supporting organizations who, especially during this current kind of state of play we're in right now with the economy and otherwise, there's a lot of companies who might need sales leadership support or need enablement support, but not in a position to hire someone full time. I'm offering a percentage of my time where I get embedded in their system. We set a few kind of key goals that we're going to focus on together, and they can essentially put me on retainer for, say, 20% of my time to just be a part of the organization for 6 months, a year. We would figure out how long it will take, but that way I can feel like I'm really in it with them and we're partners in that. So one-on-one coaching, team group coaching, speaking engagements, and fractional leadership are the 4 main pillars.
Very cool. And yeah, I'm curious also, like, how did you go about getting your first clients in this, right? Anyway, I mean, I'm asking for a friend here, but anyone who's thinking, okay, I want to start my own business. I want to do those things. Where do you start? How do you get those first customers to say yes? I guess 20 years of sales experience helps.
Again, you just got to build up all the different skills and then utilize them accordingly. But no, I think it's important to build a bridge, right? So look, I would say all the experience I've had over the 20 years help in sales and otherwise. I still, like I said, work a lot with Google. I love Google, and that place will always be home for me. So I love that I still work with Google and Googlers quite a bit. And then look, your network's really key, right? Like I built a lot of connections with people, and then people I trusted, I would give them kind of a sense of where my head's at, what I'm thinking through, and you make connections that way. So I started to make connections in thinking through different companies and people I could work with. And then once I made the transition, it was like, okay, I'm making the transition, and we started working through those things. I had 3 contracts signed. Basically, during my brief hiatus period, I signed 3 contracts. So that was only part of the hiatus. It wasn't a hiatus, but it was like set a little bit of a foundation for myself, and then get things started when I got back. So the biggest piece of advice I would say is build your bridge, right? Like it's really important to understand who are some of the key contacts, companies, people that you could work with, and then who do you trust enough to know, like, hey, I'm planning a transition here. Get a good sense for, is there a potential opportunity to work with them? So you're not jumping off a cliff and going, okay, I've got nothing, like, let's get started. So I think you've got to have something to build towards is really important. And then do not underestimate the power of networking. Like I've invested heavily in networking up front. And if you get too caught up in, well, how many hours did I spend today that I got billed for versus not billed for, it's a very short-sighted way of looking at it, because then you're just kind of chasing. You're just running after and just trying to grab whatever you can grab versus being very thoughtful of what you're trying to do and build over the longer term.
Yeah, what really stands out to me, what you were saying is like, it comes back to you're clear on your vision and you're telling people about your vision. As I teach, whenever I teach envisioning and I coach people, it's like talking about your vision is so powerful, right? Because it makes it more clear for you. And 2, it makes other people aware of your vision. So when they come across things that are aligned with your vision or opportunities for you, they'll let you know. And so you mentioned network being super important. What would you advise people looking to build their network and create these type of opportunities for themselves?
Great question. I think intentionality, again, is key. The more that you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, then you can get a sense for who would be an important person or company to engage with, and think through, like, what are you trying to get out of that, right? So like I just contributed to an article for LinkedIn recently on this exact topic, where the concept is like, it's so easy to access people now that you could go send a bunch of messages, but that's all noise if you are not intentional about the outreach, why you're doing it, what you're hoping to gain, and being very thoughtful with that approach, right? So I would encourage people to not be scared to do outreach to people that they feel could be a good connection for them or they could learn from. And look, a lot of them might not respond to you, and that's okay. But guess what? If you don't reach out, it's an automatic no. The no, you've created your own no by not even trying. So I think the intentionality is key. And then being really clear and thoughtful of your outreach, why you're reaching out. Is there a mutual benefit? Is it one-sided? And sometimes it's actually not even one-sided, because the person on the other end might actually enjoy doing that. Like I have a co-founder of a company I've talked to a couple of times now, and he was just like, I love this stuff. right? Here I feel like, am I taking too much of your time? And he's like, I love this. And for me, it's the same thing. Like, I love supporting other people. So as long as you're willing to pay it forward to others, I think it all comes full circle. But the intentionality and thoughtfulness behind it is the key. And then look, we have social media and other things. So there's no excuses to say that it's too hard to find people and reach out to them.
Just reach out, invite them on a call, have a chat. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that.
And again, be thoughtful about it. Show them, I talk a lot about like, show me, you know me, right? Like, do a little bit of your own homework in advance. Like, don't come into this cold or just give me like, hey, would love to connect because I want X, Y, and Z out of it.
Yeah. Great point. All right, Jeff, let's switch gears into what I call the Mindful Fire Final Four. You ready?
All right, let's do it.
All right. So the first question is all about vision, right? Obviously, you've had quite a bit of vision to get to this point and to make this big switch in your career, this big shift in your career. I'm curious, like, tell me about the vision, the big vision for you now for this company. What impact you want it to have? What do you see this unlocking for your life? I mean, spending time with your kids, but like, give me the big vision for this. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Big vision for this is I'm doing purposeful work and I'm helping others find their purpose along the way. Like, that's the big vision. In terms of what it means for measures of success, I would go back to what I shared earlier. Like, it's, yeah, sure, there's a monetary element to it and I want to make sure the business makes money, but I also, I'm very clear on how much time I'm going to spend on the business, the intentionality behind that. I have my own measures of success for it. And I would just encourage others to be clear on, like, what are your measures? This is such purposeful work for me. And the more that I can lean into my purpose and hopefully help other people fulfill theirs, I'll do this for the rest of my life.
Powerful stuff. Thank you for sharing that. The second question, Jeff, is what piece of advice would you give to someone early on their path to financial independence?
Yeah, great question. If you're early on the path, I mean, there's simple things, and I'm not a financial expert, but to the degree you can, max out your 401k at a very baseline level. And I would importantly share with you, make sure that you're living well within your means. I think it's easy, especially when you're younger, to just like take every paycheck and maximize all the experiences and all the things and forget about your future self. So if you're just getting started, I would encourage you to think about what would you like the 45, 55, 65-year-old version to say to the younger version of you, right? Those times will come, those days will come, and make sure that you're taking care of your future self.
That's a great way to think about it. You're investing in that future self. It's not just to have a pile of cash. It's to have options and to create the life that you want to be living.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. The third question is, what piece of advice would you give to someone getting started with meditation and or mindfulness?
So I've done this in spurts. The meditation part I've done in spurts, and the mindfulness piece I've been leaning into quite a bit. I would say, like anything else, you need to try it and experience it. Same thing I was sharing with coaching. Like, a lot of people, if you don't experience it or you don't try it, you don't know the impact it can have. Breath work in particular has such a huge impact for me. As an example, like just slowing down and breathing, I've noticed just makes a huge difference. So for those just getting started in that, try it and see what works for you. Like, there's some parts of it that I know I get too antsy and distracted and I can't do it, but I've noticed breath work it makes a huge impact for me personally.
Any particular practice or teacher that you like to listen to?
I'm currently leaning in on Shirzad's PQ program, Positive Intelligence.
Okay. I've heard very good things about that. And I think coaches can take that for free, right?
Yeah, there's
Something
different
like
grants that they do I think he does like every quarter. So I went through the grant program and then I've continued forward since then. And I do plan eventually to become a PQ coach and start coaching on it as well. But for now, I'm a user, less a coach on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. My good friend Anna, who I think was on episode 63, she's another Googler in Prague, and she speaks very highly of that. So I got to make time to check that out. All right, Jeff, the last question is, how can people learn more about you, the shift, connect with you online, and engage with all the great things you're working on?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So can find me on LinkedIn, Jeff Jaworski on LinkedIn, as well as the company, The Shift Coaching and Consulting. And my website is www.theshift.llc. Also, if you watch this and you would like to engage, I am offering complimentary discovery calls. So feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to connect.
All right. Very good. I assume they can find that at theshift.llc, right?
Absolutely. Yep. They just pop in their email, quick one sentence, and we'll set it up.
Awesome. Well, I hope you guys will check that out. I know I've learned a ton from Jeff on this call and previously in our conversations. So definitely follow him on LinkedIn and reach out to him. I'm sure there's a lot that you guys can chat about. All right. Thanks again for being here, Jeff. I learned so much, and I really appreciate you sharing your experience with the audience.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining me on today's episode of the Mindful Fire podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I invite you to hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this. This just lets the platforms know you're getting value from the episodes and you want to be here when I release additional content. If you're ready to start your Mindful Fire journey, go to mindfulfire.org/start and download my free envisioning guide. In just 10 minutes, this guide will help you craft a clear and inspiring vision for your life. Again, you can download it for free at mindfulfire.org/start. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.